now, trying to get the feel of it. Royal palms and raw silks. Cruising the beach at dawn in a red Chrysler convertible with George Shearing on the radio and a head full of bogus cocaine, and two beautiful lesbians in the front seat beside me, telling jokes to each other in French. We are on our way to an orgy, in a mansion not far from the sea, and the girls are drinking champagne from a Magnum we bought from Dunhill's, the chic and famous restaurant. There is a wet parking ticket flapping under the windshield wiper in front of me, and it bores me. I am giddy from drink. The lesbians are waving their champagne glasses at oncoming police cars, laughing gaily and smoking strong marijuana in a black pipe as we cruise along Ocean Boulevard at sunrise, living our lives like dolphins.
God bless you, Dr. Thompson.
Dr. Thompson.
To the man who taught us how to be Americans.
And
yes,
have
how
fun.
to be an American.
Salute, sir.
I
hope he's drunk in heaven.
Yeah, drunk wherever is good.
If he's not in heaven, I don't really want to go there.
Right.
You know, we're populated by conniving assholes, used car salesmen, and all manner of indecent filth.
And it's a little creepy being here on Earth without him. You know?
Yeah. This is the first time I saw, like, somebody, I didn't know died, like a celebrity, when I heard the news blip. First time I ever heard a news blip, and it actually, I didn't hear the news blip. Matt called me and told me the night, like the hour after it got posted.
Yeah.
And I was like, it stopped me dead. It ruined my fucking week,
Yeah, it's been a weird week for sure, man.
Indeed.
Yeah, I woke up at like 5 in the morning and saw that Matt had called, and I was checking my voicemail as I sat down in front of my computer, and all the voicemail said was, Thompson killed himself tonight. Hope I didn't wake you up. And then click disconnect, and at the same time I'm looking at probably 3 or 4 emails from my friends all confirming that, and it was just so surreal. And I sat there for a second thinking well, maybe I should write something, and then I was like, I just gotta go back to bed.
Yeah.
Went back to bed and woke Amanda up and told her. She started crying, and I just sat there and numb, not really believing it, and just staring at my ceiling, seeing flashes of the old bastard's mug with blood smeared across it, running through my head.
I had no idea what to do. I was just finished writing at the computer, and I walked and I sat down and thought I'd watch the highlights on SportsCenter, and I turned on SportsCenter, and about 10 seconds into me watching it, Carl Ravitch is, and all of a sudden Thompson's mug pops into the frame, and I knew immediately what it was. But then the secondary shock came when Carl Ravitch said of apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. And at that moment, I don't know, I was late.
A lot of questions come through your head, right?
Yeah, scared the shit out of me. And I got up and I called Brian. I was walking in some sort of weird haze. I just didn't know what to make of it yet. It was just the not that he died, but the variety of death was immediately fucking crushing to me. And then I just sat and stared at the TV for a while, and I just didn't even want to talk about it. So I waited. Olga was asleep on the couch. I waited until she stirred, and then I felt like wouldn't be right for me to keep it from her. And I told her, and immediately she just grabbed her heart, and just like I saw the life drop out of her.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, man.
It was a weird deal, but we've made times have changed over the past week. Pardon me for one moment.
Well, that was one of the most unsettling things for me. It was it definitely seemed like an earmark in my life, and I think it's a day that I'll always remember as far as the times really feeling like they changed. Yeah. For both good and ill, for both sadness that he was gone, and kind of a feeling like I was punched in my stomach, in my my eternal stomach. But at the same time, it's actually kind of resolved itself in a somewhat positive way. It was now it feels now there's really there's no crutch,
Right,
there's nobody to fucking lean on, and now
there's no fucking Buddha at the side of the road.
Yeah, now we gotta do it, and there's nobody else to carry the slack.
Yeah, there's no icons to put your faith in.
So,
it's interesting. I've had a really different experience this week because I've been so busy. I haven't had any time for reflection on it. It doesn't even seem real to me. I mean, we were just talking about him and watching that fantastic movie, Breakfast with Hunter, which, of course, we recommend to all the listeners. Great documentary. Sure. We were just watching that the other week, and we'd just been talking about him again, and then here it comes up. You know, it's
yeah. You know, in a lot of ways, I almost felt like it was not so much like a transubstantiation, but like almost like a final call out. You know, like there was this definite resurgence. You know, and obviously, you know, it's partially timed. You know, like based upon that media being released. I mean, I think it was released last October or something like that. Was when you first told me about it, but. You know, that we just got it for, you know, I just got it for Clayton's birthday. And so it was like within 20 days of getting it, you know, and it was like just this huge resurgence of, and this re-understanding of what Thompson meant in my life, you know.
Right.
And then at the peak of that, all of a sudden, you know, he checks out, you know.
I was really shocked by the really empathetic way that I reacted. Not because, I mean, Thompson was just, like, seminally important to my life, but it in so many ways, like, you know, like, moved beyond that
disengaged
point.
yourself
Yeah, I disengaged
from
myself from that point, you know, because from that point in my life, he was something that, you know, helped me come into, like, my own existence as, you know, a recalcitrant soul to the system.
Helped you get in a lot of trouble, too.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, and that was part of the reason I had to get away from him, because I would, you know, like, part of my problem was I got tuned to Thompson and I became less of me and more of, like, a grotesque Thompson caricature.
Right.
You know, which was, I mean, I think it happened to a lot of people, you know, and you mistake the work for just getting fucked up, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was really interesting when you showed me the film. We watched it, and it brought him back into my life, and I definitely hadn't thought about him in like 5, 6, 7 years. You know, hadn't read anything in like 5 years. Hadn't like, you know, I just like Matt, like it had already been a part of my life, and I'd kind of disconnected myself from him at a certain degree, and then here it comes right back, and it's all, and then he takes his life, and it's all coming back around. It's amazing when synchronicities happen in your life, you know, these sort of things. It's pretty fascinating.
Well, he being a, you know, pretty powerful shaman in his own right, I think is a master of those synchronicities. You know?
Of the American counterculture, absolutely, you know.
I mean, I love the fucking quote that's been circulating around now. It's like he's what do you say? I'm a road man for the Lords of Karma. Fucking brilliant. And that was something that I never picked up on about him until watching that Breakfast with Hunter documentary. It was just like, you know, you get kind of, you know, peripheral spiritual, innuendos in his writing, you know, and he's like definitely a spiritual person in his own right. But I never realized how, you know, how seriously he actually took that. And it seems like from watching that documentary and listening to the commentary that he was definitely. You know, he had mastered some grace in his life.
Absolutely.
You know, and
you see it in his later life. You see it in his smile when he's alone with friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I wonder, not to cut you off, but I just wonder if he died the way he did because he did understand that he'd become sort of, he became like the leaning post of, you know, like 2 generations.
Right.
Of, you know.
You know.
And the last one of his scene, really.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
Be it like, you know, this journalistic scene even too, with like we saw George Plumpton on that documentary who passed away this year, I guess, like Tom Wolfe and Gay Talese are still alive. You talk about guys in new journalism. But like as far as like 60 counterculture figures who were like huge influences upon those of us, you know.
Well, popular culture.
Kesey died a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And
Well, first there was Leary, you know, and then Ginsberg,
Right. Well, Burroughs.
and then Burroughs died after that,
Yeah.
and then Kesey, and now, and I remember when Burroughs died, you know, that was a big to do as well, and but then like we kept saying the whole time, well, it's like fucking the only person that's left is Thompson, you know, and now there's nothing, and there's no.
There's no link back to that earlier age of like recalcitrance of like bucking the powers that be, you know, and you know.
a good question is there any journalist working now that even has a pinch of that kind of challenging style?
That's my knowledge.
Has the media become just a voice of whatever it's reporting?
I mean, I think it's a different time in a certain respect. Is that like at that time, writers still could be rock stars,
right?
You know, and now it's like not so much. But you know, you do have like was reading, like, somebody was talking about that in one of their columns. Like, they said, like, Lewis Black is the closest person.
I don't even know who that is.
He's real funny. He's hilarious. I wouldn't even equate him to the same thing at all.
You know,
Not at all.
He's just an angry comedian. It's not the same.
I read today online a little piece that Christopher Hitchens wrote about Thompson. And in a lot of ways, although I don't necessarily agree with Hitchens' politics, a lot of ways, like, guys like that are much more the vanguard of what Thompson stood for. I think a lot of what Thompson's, like, essence came to be was not diametrically opposed, but, like, differentiated from what Thompson actually was as a talent. Like the idea of Thompson as, like, a vanguard clown of the drug-crazed youth overshadowed in his later years the fact that he was, like, a hell of a writer and a damn good sociologist, somebody who could get inside something and explain a situation colorfully and really rip to the fucking bone.
Well,
There's
he was an
a-
artist rather than a journalist.
Definitely.
He was a guy that was making, he basically getting up under the engine.
Right.
Of all the fucking cliches
There's
that were
a-
actually coming out.
There's a great article in the Nation, which I'll put a link on. I posted after our like, kind of like internal list, and I'll post it on the show notes for this. But the guy was writing, I can't remember what 19th century poet he equated him to, but said that essentially, like, Thompson was similar in the respect that, like, his commentary on the people that he wrote about actually superseded the powers of the people that he was writing about.
Right.
It's like
You know?
Jonathan Swift or something like
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Mark Twain.
Definitely. There's
very
definitely
much
a
in
Mark
that, very
Twain
much
right
in that
there.
American vein of the, like the satirist who
Right.
holds more truth inside of his,
Fiction.
inside of his fiction than was actually accounted for in factual accounts.
A modern Mark Twain though is more like David Sedaris. They're trying to. He's being compared a lot to Mark Twain in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If you take a modern take on it, if Twain was alive today with the same kind of, like, that acerbic wit, that kind of. It's a very different life. I mean, we just lead a very, very different
But David
society.
Sedaris is also gay and living in France.
True.
You know what I mean?
But his writings are about, like, just Americana,
Right. But,
Well, and a lot of, and again, this Nation piece pointed back to a lot of, like, the legacy that Thompson left, which I think is still kind of waiting to be picked up on, is the way to affect local politics.
right.
You know, and in a lot of ways that his running for sheriff in 1970 is the thing that put him on the map and that allowed Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas to happen and allowed then Campaign Trail 72 and really changed the face of local politics and like influenced a lot of the new politics, especially in like Berkeley and Madison and stuff like that.
I've got a question I think is interesting to discuss about him. Do you think that, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, do you think that in the end days, here the last 10 years or so, was he really haunted by the cult of personality, the character that he had become famous for, and do you think it was stifling to him?
Well, I was just talking about, and then I'll stop talking because like one of the things I learned from last week's show is I'm sick of hearing myself talk.
Well, there's only four of us. Somebody's got to talk, man.
Yeah.
But
I mean, in answer to that question, I think it's a good one.
I picked up the Criterion Collection DVD of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas today, and it's fucking brilliant. It's got an extra disc of supplements. So it's got Thompson doing commentary on the film. It's also got Terry Gilliam and Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro during commentary. It's got Thompson reading and then commenting on his introduction to Oscar Acosta's autobiography. But then it's also got this hour-and-a-half documentary that the BBC did in '78, where Ralph Steadman and the BBC crew flew over to Aspen and documented Ralph Steadman and Hunter Thompson first driving to Vegas and then to Hollywood to basically like start the talks for what would eventually become, Where the Buffalo Roam or whatever. But it was at least I only saw about half of it before Matt came pick me up, but it was really actually like really sad to watch because it was right when Thompson was starting to have his kind of his nervous breakdown because he could no longer be Hunter Thompson, and everybody wanted him to be Raoul Duke.
Right.
And he kept talking about that, and he kept talking about how he was no longer allowed to be Hunter Thompson, that he was becoming an appendage of this character that he created in this book to make a point, and that like when he was going on these college tours to speak,
Right.
he didn't know who people wanted. He didn't know if they wanted Thompson or if they wanted Duke, and he was really of the mind more and more
Right.
that they wanted Duke, and
Right.
it like got to the point where there was a scene in it where when they were in LA, when they were in Hollywood, and they were following her around with the cameras, Thompson like went and hid and was like crouched down behind a car and like screaming at them to go away because of all the crowds that were being drawn just from the cameras.
Right.
And he was just, and it was really sad to see this guy like,
Right.
At times
Right.
being tortured by this creature that he created, but then at the same time like in another in the next cut
Right.
putting on a show that
Right.
you could see was obviously not him, but thinking that's what people wanted.
I would think that kind of fame that he brought to himself would completely disarm his ability to be a true Raoul Duke or even a true Thompson. Like the fact that he had some anonymity gave him the ability to jake the system.
That's exactly what he said. He said when I went to cover Carter's nomination, more people were coming up to me asking for autographs than they were to Jimmy Carter. And he's like, I can no longer go into a room and be a ghost, which is what allowed me to be a journalist in the first place.
And I think like I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was it was pretty obvious inside of Thompson once after the Fear and Loathing the campaign trail from '72 on, you saw him like reenacting this like Raoul Duke script, and you could see that he was trapped in it.
Pretty hollow, yeah.
Yeah, it was really hollow. It was just phoning it in, man. It's like, oh, I'm here, like, drinking whiskey and like being mean and like, like I've got a gun.
Look, I've got a cigarette and a cigarette holder.
And the hardcore journalism died.
Yeah.
But there was a piece in Rolling Stone, and I don't remember exactly when it was written. Maybe I want to say 10 years ago, in which he was just talking about his like own life. It very much read like a eulogy. He was talking about swimming around in the pool with his girlfriend and coming up to her behind her and grabbing her tight. And he was very much like...
And then she wasn't there.
Yeah, and he was very much like just putting this fucking Raoul Duke ghost out to pasture. And I think that's what you start to see. I mean, like, inside the documentary and later, is you still see him, like, playing that part a little bit, but he seems just, like, much more acceptant and, comfortable and wise with age about the legacy that he has left. And, I think that it's just something that came. I think by the time he actually died, I think that he was comfortable with his legacy. I think that breakdown came earlier, and that it sort of, like, with age, he sort of, like, put it down.
I think, I think people were missing the point.
Yeah, but they always do, man.
Which evidently is going to happen. But the thing is like,
Just
not
Jesus.
to say that I have the point, but I think, that I get it all, or anything like that shit. But it's like just his capacity to, make fucking great books that can, like, change your thinking. That changed everybody at this fucking table, like
Changed your outlook.
Most people that I know and respect,
yeah, it's like I mean, he's one of like the great American, possibly the last great.
You want to talk about a
writer.
gateway drug?
No, there'll be more.
There'll be more, but there's definitely like he's like when I went to the zoo once, and I go down to the zoo, Lincoln Park Zoo.
Yeah.
And I go to the lion den.
Okay.
And it's the most sad fucking thing because here it is. We are these massively reproduced. We are like the mammalian roaches.
Mm-hmm.
We work by quantity, and you have these like beautiful beasts that are strong and can tear your head off with one swipe. And we've eliminated them. We've eliminated that.
Especially when you cage them, right?
Yeah, we cage them. We've turned them into we've turned them into characters.
Into
a sideshow.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a real lion. It's
Well,
a character of a lion.
We've anesthetized them.
Right.
We've made them safe.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
this.
That's why you see them like pacing back and forth, just miserable, like a shell of what they once were. They don't even know why they're caged.
Especially the
All they
female
know is that
lions,
they're
yeah.
fucking miserable.
It's like soulless vampires
I
that are
think-
trying to like capture something and hang it on the wall because they want to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
You
how
can
to,
never
how to
you
be
can never
able to
understand
explore
it in that environment.
And I think
Because it's not itself anymore. You've completely changed like its essence.
That's what happens to anybody that. It's not just that you can write, because there's a lot of motherfuckers that write that I don't give a shit. You know, like as you say, Matt. Like our modern contemporary literature is based on cleverness and bullshit like that. I mean, people that can write, they have that skill to put words together. But there's very few people in our continuum of heroes, of literary people or artists or anybody who really want to get up under the hood.
Yep.
Yeah.
People aren't
Change
breaking
the
ground.
fucking-
No.
Make the world conform to them.
No, they're sitting around in this like postmodern haze
Yep.
of just fucking cleverness. Like how witty can I be? How much can I? How much can I?
Reference and how much
many,
do
how
I
many things
know?
can I reference? How much can I act like Woody Allen?
I mean,
You know what I mean? How much can I? How far can I delve inside of my own neuroses?
Basically, we killed the
Yeah.
lions. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, yeah. The
Case of
vampires finally fucking suck their host dry.
Well,
And that is-
yes,
Because
but
when they're
it's-
caged, you
I
can
mean-
control them, package them, and resell them. Just like especially Brookfield Zoo,
Right.
which is more theme park than zoo. It's not just here's the animals for sale. Here they are in a simulated environment with a tour guide with
Right.
with zebra stripes on, and you can learn some information about the animals. But
I mean, it's even like you look at the music industry. I mean, it's like
Oh, yeah.
you look at like in '96 and '97. You know, there was just incredible music being made. You know, like the Lips were just putting out was it Zurika, fucking Juna 44. You know, Mercury Rev, fucking Tortoise was just hitting the scene. You know, it was like
a lot of electronica was really fresh then. Yeah,
as
no
far as
doubt.
I can tell, like that was the last time that music was really doing something. That was the last time that I felt like buying an entire scene or an entire industry was overwhelmed
No,
by it.
you're right. The music scene now is like the what's the cutting edge is mashups, which is like perfectly postmodern. All it is like where we're just
And it's
repurposing.
pretty
what
cool,
we
but
got.
it's not.
Oh,
it's
there's
not,
a lot of great stuff going on, but it's that same postmodern trap.
It's all segregated
And
into
it's
itself. I mean,
fragmented,
the last really like intense mass like Beatles style movement was Nirvana.
Or-
You know, and the ability. I mean, and that was the last like really good band that I can think of. That
and they were
grabbed-
powerful, and they changed a
They
lot.
were a brilliant fucking band, but the last one that really grabbed like the mass of
Yes.
culture behind them that was able to like push things
That-
into this
Encapsulate a time.
right in the way in which the Beatles did or the Stones did.
I would agree with that, but I take some acceptance to the fact that the credence that's given to Nirvana. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Nirvana, I really like Nirvana, but they're really informed by the punk rock scene, the punk rock that came before them.
No, that's true, but everybody's informed what we came before.
But they really did
But
change.
they galvanized
They
a-
changed.
What it is, that's what I'm saying, and I'm with you on that. And
I mean, the Beatles
agree.
are really informed by Chuck Berry and
Oh, sure.
Elvis Presley and
or
whatever
even
else.
the Strawberry Alarm Clock
Right,
and shit, you know?
right,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they galvanized the culture. So it's not so much like what their influences were, who was doing it that was more real, but it's more about what they were able to create
Yeah.
and the way in which that it brought culture together.
Indeed,
and
indeed.
and you know,
Harness
like,
the zeitgeist.
Yeah,
Right,
harness the
yeah, and
zeitgeist,
somebody
exactly.
was open enough to be the host to whatever current
Right.
was passing.
Speaking of
That's right,
zeitgeist,
dude.
I was just reading today. Somebody was talking about. I was reading an article about iFilm and about how much stuff is starting to get downloaded, like clips when they're really like hot, and that one of the hottest clips that's ever been watched and downloaded across the internet is Jon Stewart on Crossfire telling calling Tucker Carlson a dick. It's like one of the most downloaded and watched clips ever. But hang on one second. Then in the same article, they mentioned that Jon Stewart has grabbed the zeitgeist of our time for our younger age group. Yeah.
So to bring that back to Thompson, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say that the two most apparent heirs presently to Thompson are The Onion and The Daily Show.
Yeah, indeed.
But both are still so much.
They're fucking
so,
cheeky, dude.
So
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah.
You know, they're so. I mean, it's interesting what they're doing, and it's it's amusing and it's true and it's poignant.
But they're
Onions,
marginalized
Onion-
by their entire existence is marginalized from the get-go, you know, because they're not in the meat of it, you know. There's nothing dangerous about them.
I would say
That's
that the
right.
Onion,
Subversive.
Onion is not subversive, but it is to a point. And I think the thing is that they actually encapsulate so much in the sugar to make the medicine go down. Right. I mean, like, there's a lot of jokes and everything, you know, and a lot of comedy, but a lot of it is like, all of it is social commentary.
Very biting social commentary, but it's
That's because it's allowed to be marginalized.
But the thing is, it's not really. The thing is, the margins have been moved farther inside of this massive fucking of the mainstream sphere. Like, it's hard to go out of the margins. You can be a fucking serial killer and be a celebrity with a fucking talk show.
And not only that, but like culture has been segregated to a degree that it's there's still things out there. There's still great music out there. There's still but it is not. But there's no necessity for like the gigantic corporations who run the media industries to put that out there, and those who will search it out will find it on the internet, and it creates like little subsects of people who are interested in this stuff. But it's impossible
because the information is so available.
Well, the interesting is that we are actually living in a very interesting time. I mean, and this was said a million times. But specifically on the music industry, we're living at a time when the industry that has been built up over 30, 40 years is actually in the middle of being dismantled.
Right.
We're actually living when a giant cultural industry that affects culture worldwide is being dismantled and destroyed.
Not just that, but the art industry. I mean, everything. I mean, like, just the way in which people communicate is changing.
Mm-hmm, indeed.
How would one apply? I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, dismantling of the music industry, the death of the music industry. Today the talk is about death, and the death happens to mechanisms, societal mechanisms. Death happens to, a lot of intangible shit that, we can't see. Death happens to zeitgeist. Mm-hmm. Zeitgeist die and change.
And change,
transform.
Yes, the spirit of the times changes.
So, would you say that the dismantling of the music industry could be gauged to a degree by all the shit that Michael Jackson's in now, and the Madonna's conversion to the Kabbalah, this weird 60, weird. She's trying to be like a social activist now.
Cut Madonna out and let's talk about Michael Jackson for a second.
Take him one at a time.
Let's take him one at a time. He is a great symbol of the dismantling of the machinery of great music industry. The great, and I don't mean in a good way, great as in size. The large music industry being dismantled is what we see in the Michael Jackson trial. And all the defendants that are coming, all the people are going to come in and take the character witness stand. There's like 200 people, and it reads like a who's list of the 1980s and 90s,
What I would say is, it seems to me that, while there is... It's almost like all of the segregation of information has allowed for those of us who live on the margins, who are on the perimeters of what is of mass culture. It enables us to find that which we want to absorb, and completely releases the progenitors of mass culture from any necessity to cater to us at all. And what that does is, the sleepwalking hordes just get fed American Idol and all this shit. So basically what it amounts to is the mass movement is constantly crap, and everything else, anything that might actually challenge something, is immediately marginalized.
Which was kind of has been my question now for about 5 minutes, is how devastating is that to any kind of dissident movement, that any material that may have otherwise been picked up by the beast, by the media beast, and become a galvanizing force, is now
what are we losing?
It's a truer
Absolutely.
fan base. It's a truer ideologue or whatever. But it has less wheels, because we no longer we can't any longer jockey onto the back of
Right.
the thing that we're fighting
There's
against.
no longer a
seven-headed
rolling
dragon got its head cut off.
right, and there's no longer a Rolling Stone all of a sudden picking up somebody like Hunter S. Thompson and carrying that to millions of people who would otherwise not have been, not even have been challenged.
And it's not even that the seven-headed dragon's got its head cut off. It's like the seven-headed dragon is no longer making space for the thing that might have cut its head off
Right,
to ride upon
right,
it.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
It's interesting
That's
that what we're essentially worried about, though, is media control by large conglomerates.
Absolutely.
You know, but before we were born, people in the know were worried about the same damn thing. Have you seen Network? You know, the movie Network is all about the conglomeration of media control, and this movie was written and produced and filmed
Before AT&T or before Illinois Bell ever split apart.
not Illinois Bell, Bell
Labs, yeah,
not
Bell
Bell Labs.
Anyway, but that was the
Anyway,
first.
yeah,
That
I
was the
understand.
first real corporate fragmenting.
Yeah, written by AT&T,
which turned into AT&T.
yeah. When
AT&T was the one that was separated.
It was the original.
AT&T was separated and was allowed
Right.
to keep long distance. That's what happened,
Okay.
and then it was
and then it
broken
was
into
split
the
up
baby
into
bells.
a bunch of little bells.
And what we actually are
Okay.
living in is times when the bells have been, they're starting to be eaten back up, and we're about right back to where we were in
And AT&T is going to merge with,
83, 84, I think was when it happened.
I remember when it happened. I remember hearing on the radio as I was driving.
Most of the baby bells have been bought by SBC. SBC is now the new AT&T.
Would you say? Okay, I'm gonna throw this out. So, okay, using that as an analogy, I'm just the guy that's trying to make connections that might not exist or whatever. Just throwing it out here for you, beloved listener.
Packing cigarettes here, listening.
Singular.
We've got a lot of listeners now.
Oh, really?
Real.
Fuck yeah, we love you all. Thank you.
Seriously,
Fish or cut bait, people. Be a hero. Live the
stop
hero's
dreaming
journey.
like pussies.
Yeah, be a hero. Get a fucking mic. We want to hear you too. More voices.
Call the line.
We live in this like reconfiguration of the 80s in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And what exactly does that portend? You know, what does that mean? What are the ripples in that fucking ugly pond?
I think that's just like a speeding up of the reproduction of culture.
It's just
like they've already got like VH1 Wheel of the 90s and shit.
Which is
you know
hilarious,
what I mean?
What
Like
does that mean?
history is just like is
I'll tell you
yesterday
what it is.
now. You know, it's all
Now
just speeded
what
up.
you're seeing is the effects of the Republicans back in power. The 80s are a lot of function of Reaganism and Reaganomics and the Reagan era. And we lived through the 90s with the Democrats in power. Although, you know, they were always fighting the Republican majority Senate, you know, of course. But we still had a Democrat, a good old boy, a party guy at the helm who continued to be a party guy as opposed to our current president who used to be a party guy and then found Christ.
Yeah, you do drugs with their Thompson.
Oh yeah, did you see the thing in the paper this week about the tape that came out?
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, we gotta give this to our listeners because maybe they don't read the news.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's all over the news. You can't miss, especially if our listeners are like us and they may or may not watch Jon
Get
Stewart.
it. Tell them about it.
Well, it was essentially a tape that a Fink friend of Bush, but friend nonetheless. Prior to the Republican nomination in 2000, was talking to him, and they were strategizing about how they were going to handle once he was nominated, and he expressed concern that.
Let me give some context because you're a little off. I know a little bit about this. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
He was writing a book, and this is what his book is about people. What makes a family
fathers
the fathers and the growing up and the raising of presidents, and what's that about? And he was friends with Bush, already knew Bush's father, and wanted to kind of get insight into who were you before you became president, in the hopes that he would get this way, and was talking to him. And Bush knew he was taping. It wasn't secret. It wasn't like he had like a wire on him.
I heard it was. I heard he didn't know he was being taped.
I heard that he did, and I think that's the Republican line. Like the guy was taping their interview, you know, and they were talking about it, and he was trying to be coy about his. He's like, I'm not going to answer the marijuana question because I don't want kids to know what I did.
He said marijuana, LSD, and cocaine.
LSD. He did acid.
Yeah.
Well, I think he did everything, man.
If he did acid, how
Why
come
not? He's a fucking jaded.
But see, the thing is, but see, like inside of that community, as long as he like saw Billy Graham, waved an
Right.
American flag, and was reborn,
Then that's fodder
Then that's actually a good
definitely.
thing.
Yeah.
Because the entire idea of the movement is to move somebody from like this corrupt, evil soul
Fucking Amazing
into, like,
Grace shit.
into like this realization of grace, the realization of how to become.
Well, it's the
a
born again.
righteous
I think the
person.
real sad
You
thing
know?
about that is that he was allowed to engage in that experiment or that experience, which I think so many people have, and only be able to contextualize it in with the mind of it was something that fucked him up.
Ah,
Right.
Like
yeah.
you know, I mean, I think that, and there's all kinds of reasons. Maybe Thompson is even one of the reasons why that was allowed to happen. But
Right.
for many years, and it's probably still happening. But LSD was just another way to get fucked up.
Well, that was the dangerous part of Leary's fucking journey, man.
Right.
I mean, like it took
Larry.
LSD out of the.
See, that-
It took LSD out of the therapist's office and moved LSD into just like which had its wonderful
and let me
effects.
say this. Yeah, let me say this before we go any further. I also have a strong affinity for it not being such a fucking academic, tight ass mystic avenue either, because I've had some with most
Right.
everybody here present had some wonderful times
some
being
weird ones.
pretty abusive in one of some of the most
Right.
joyful ways
Right.
ever. You know?
It's absolutely true, but the overall effect of that it can be seen inside of the effect of ecstasy in Houston. You know,
Oh, yeah.
when it was first born. I mean, like this drug that has such wonderful therapeutic capabilities is all of a sudden given to the populace. You can see it inside of the rave culture of the early 90s.
Okay.
You know, these kids who have never had any experience with psychedelics coming in and taking this drug that makes them feel good, assuming that is like that is like the core of the psychedelic experience.
I think because, again, like to bring it back to Thompson, you have as many, and I've actually been like just so pleasantly surprised to see like the mainstream media like fucking
Right.
step up and give him the props that
Right.
he's been
Absolutely.
due for so long.
Did anybody see
Journalists love him. That's
Did Charlie Rose do anything on Thompson? I've
Oh,
been
I
searching.
don't know. I don't
I've been
know.
checking the Charlie Rose site every day. I'm pretty sure he was going to do some sort of a.
But I think
would be awesome. I'd love to see
I
that.
think what's interesting is like he's had also like a lot of denigrators, and I think I'm losing my point here, but I think one of the things here it is, with the spirit of Americans and the spirit of exploring consciousness and the spirit of exploring spirit, there is still this very strong veil of Puritanism
Absolutely.
that carries through with it. You know, that is like, why shouldn't you be able to have a decadent spiritual experience just for the fucking joy of it?
Because that's
You
where
know?
that's where the whole puritanical concept. Okay, because I mean you're dealing. Speaking for myself as a guy who grew up in a very puritanical culture in a way, Southern Baptist, like grew up in the Southern Baptist Church.
We all did, actually. We all grew up in, not Southern Baptist
Right,
Church,
right.
but we all grew up, and that's the American
Yeah.
base
Right.
ethic.
Like we all grew up in religion and shit. We were all freaks from birth.
Religion or not, the Puritan work ethic,
But it's like,
ethic
but
is
the
what
thing
we got.
is what I always, what you always get, as an American, that's where the conflict occurs because
Right.
on the one
Yes.
hand you have this like fucking Protestant utopia where God is built off of wooden nails, like this pragmatic. Even in Catholic churches,
The
even
Jeffersonian
in
Bible,
even in
man.
old churches that still have like so much ritual and beauty to them, when they come to America, they get stripped down.
Right.
And they get turned because there's such a Protestant influence here. I mean, and you get down to like the wooden nails, and they want everything to be. There's like this hunger for homogeny.
Right.
But at the same time, the
Well,
thing that counteracts that
Okay.
is the fact that in America, our primary myths are dealing with one guy who charges the mountain with the gun And when you're a child, who the fuck do you want to be? You want to be the guy crying in the pew? No. You want to be the guy that charges the hill with the gun.
I mean, my struggle and my dilemma and the thing that's all that piques my interest is like why can't we indulge decadently, orgiastically, and have that be spiritual and not have it negate the spiritual levity? I mean, I think that's the thing.
That's what I meant by the guy with the gun.
Right.
The thing is we have in Protestantism the idea of the I'll get right to you, Matt. I'm sorry. Matt's standing here with his
very
hand
politely.
hung out. Very politely. He is just dying to say something. But we have the idea of basically the interpretive. Even if you're a Catholic that grew up in America or an Anglican or whatever you are,
especially if so,
if you grow up with the idea of the basically in your interpretation of the individual. Like, whereas in Protestantism it's taught to you very hard that you have your Word of God here, you have your article of faith, and God's going to tell you personally,
a personal relationship with God.
Yeah, personal relationship with God.
This is where our individualism comes from.
And the thing is that is the thing, that is the kernel of beauty that I've always held on to, even though I'm like a freak or a fuck up or whatever the fuck I am.
And that's what makes you unique.
Is that I believe in that I believe in the personal relationship or whatever the magnanimous forces in nature are meant for me to do.
Nobody else can tell you
but that
what God
but that
wants you
does
to do.
sidestep the social order of
Absolutely.
Of what the churches are calling you towards.
Let's Matt.
It's that sort of environment, that sort of like Protestant like knuckle down environment, when it meets with this idea of American manifest destiny, of American individualism, that allows for the creation of people like Thompson.
Yes.
It's that which creates. I mean, Thompson is a purely, and Mark Twain too, purely American spirits,
other people.
locked inside of this American ideal. But there's two sides to this American ideal. You know, it's like good and evil inside of the Godhead. You know, and the ability to like tear out from it wouldn't exist if that puritanical form didn't exist. You know, so it's all like part and parcel of this process.
It very much reminds me of the Lenny Bruce quote where he says, "I'm not a moralist. If I was a moralist, I'd be out volunteering and doing something about this. I'm a comedian. I'm just saying shit about this, and I'm making my money off the wrongs of the world." You know, which is, but. So it's like, so how and will we ever, or will that be the death of us? Because in a lot of ways that has been the demon that has driven most of the dissident voices into their graves and like where they found their identity, but at the same time where they found their friction, that was also the thing that was eating against them. That they found an enemy to fight against. But the enemy was the thing. They needed their enemy desperately.
Right. Absolutely,
gotta have an enemy.
And very few.
Gotta have an enemy.
Very few dissonant voices come to as a peaceful end as Thompson did. You know,
and on their terms.
He decided when he went. You know, and like most dissonant voices, you know, meet up with like a fucking Robespierre.
You know what's interesting is that
you're beheaded by the very animal you built.
The fact that Thompson took his own life, and actually, no, let me say, the fact that Thompson took his own life is actually very much in the extreme ascetic yogic tradition. That when the yogi reaches his
it was an ascension of sorts.
His side of his ultimate understanding of this life, all he can do on this life is that he chooses the time of his death and leaves the body.
Yeah. Right.
And I love to look at it like that.
Well, the more I read about Thompson's death, the more I believe that he saw it just like that. You know, and that was my initial fear upon hearing about his death, was that he died.
Godspeed, sweet Bubba.
Godspeed,
Bless your
sweet
heart, man.
Prince.
You've made my life so wonderful. So wonderful.
Thank you for bringing us together, man.
Excuse us, listeners.
Whoa.
Oh, wow, that was big.
That was a big one. I'm sorry.
Wow. I only took a half.
Finish that up.
But yeah, my initial fear when I heard that Thompson had killed himself my initial reaction was, oh my god, it's a condemnation of fun.
Right.
You know, it's like my initial reaction was like he killed himself, and if he had done that
Yes.
out of pain,
Yes.
out of like a sense of like destitution, out of a sense of failure, then that would, for me, destroy everything that I ever put in.
It would have negated everything that he ever.
It would have absolutely negated it, you know, because it was like an acquiescence.
That's kind of how I feel about Hemingway. That's why.
Well, Hemingway was much more so
Hemingway
like that.
was actually
Right.
he actually did give up and was crushed because he couldn't feel like he could write anymore.
Right.
Just like there's a good line from Stranger Than Fiction, Bad Religion song. Where I know. But there's a line in it where he says, "I want to know why Hemingway cracked." You know, it is a whole line.
Well, I think it's pretty clear why Hemingway cracked.
In the
read
Great
Hemingway.
Shark Hunt, there's a great essay that Thompson wrote. It's like what brought Hemingway to not Kratom, but it's something like it's basically the place that the town that he finally
Pickett, Arkansas.
No, he shot himself. I thought he shot himself in
or
Montana.
maybe it's the name. It starts with a K.
I thought he shot himself on a ranch in Montana.
No, he wrote Farewell to Arms in Arkansas.
But what I'm saying is that I prefer to see Hunter's death as an ascension as opposed to a cracking.
Well, I think it was.
This is what I'm saying.
Hunter was a much more essentially spiritual being.
Kind of a Harry Carey.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's
He threw himself on his
exactly
sword.
what I'm saying.
It was like I told Jason last night. I mean, like we were talking about Thompson and reincarnation. He's like, "Wow, it seems weird that Thompson would be into that." And I was like, you know, kind of it does, because there's so much of an essence of Thompson that is very like Hemingway-esque as far as his like personal empowerment.
Two-fistedness.
Is very much like the American ethos of I'm a fucking man and I'm gonna run through this goddamn wall. Yeah. But anybody who has taken as many psychedelics as Thompson did cannot be without like a certain understanding of the cycles and the spiritual nature of man's existence.
And I think that anybody that and this is definitely a beef with me, and this is and it came to a head at the Halloween party. Is like anybody that's actually that has read Thompson and that respects him on a level, and like if you denigrate Thompson, it's like you're crossing my path, you know, and I will act as his armament, and I will strike you down in any way that I possibly can.
What he's talking about, tell people what you're talking about.
There are a lot of fucking dumb dingbats that I'll
give the example.
I'll get to it. That experienced Thompson in the animal that they needed or wanted to, and suddenly felt that all it took to be Thompson was to get an 8-ball and drink rum and suck down a grapefruit, and so the most recent run into this was at a Halloween party with this fucking
fantastic Ill Measures party.
Yeah, great Ill Measures party. And I had the unfortunate opportunity at the end of the evening to run into this geek that was pretending he was Thompson.
I think I grabbed you to talk to him because
there's several people out there like that.
And
but listen to this.
He claims that he was he's a journalist and that he did an interview with Thompson a couple years ago and saw him and was just yucking up about.
Was he dressed like Thompson?
No. He had his head shaved.
This might be the same fucking guy that we knew over in Lawndale. Did he have Thompson's cell phone number and his email address?
No. He wasn't all about being Thompson or anything.
He was trying to act like Thompson, and he was definitely invoking the bravado of which is what most of the people that don't get Thompson, that don't understand that this guy was actually and not to underwrite his machismo, because he was very much about that.
And the machismo is intoxicating.
But he was he was trying to act like that the arrogance and the chest forward attitude was all there was about Thompson, and so I'm talking to him, and he's going on about how sitting there with Thompson in a room full of strippers, and Thompson was sucking a liquid solution of heroin because he'd had a back pain, and he was like, it's great, the drugs are the only thing that's keeping Thompson alive anymore. And it's
he did say that.
Yeah, when he said that, I had to fucking I turned my back and I walked away. And then I came back and I ran back into him later that evening, and we engaged in a conversation again, and I brought up George Bataille. I can't remember how I got to it, And the little fucking geek like looks at me. He's like, "Oh, the French! I hate the French!" And like tried to like invoke this this ignorance, you know, and this total lack of understanding of 20th century intelligence in the name of like protecting his fucking tiny little fucking home of dumbness, you know. And it's just like, and that is the thing that fucking gets
Thompson
in
out,
my
dude.
and scared the shit out of Thompson.
And it would freak anybody out. I mean, like you talk about Thompson being a rock star. It's the exact same thing that has happened with the fucking Rolling Stones. I mean, they haven't put a gun in their mouth yet because they've made a lot of money and they just don't give a shit. But I mean, if you look at like the Rolling Stones and like the up in anything up until Some Girls and then anything after, it's just this big period of phoning it in. And having a bunch of people like invoke Keith Richards as if he's just like some drugged out punk, where in reality he was like a fucking like a brilliant vanguard of
but the Rolling Stones,
the
the Rolling Stones haven't been trying to like push any message or get to any kind of pure ethic of rock and roll or anything. They got their money and they're living their lives.
And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. Again, like since Monday, since everybody found out about his death, there's been like all these upsurges of like NPR has posted an interview they did with him back in '97. Democracy Now! Posted a great interview that they did with him in 2003.
You're gonna put all these links on the site,
and I'll put all these in the show notes. And he was as sharp and as prescient in 2003 and in 2001 about Bush and about the shit that was going down with Bush and with the war in Afghanistan, the turn of the war in Iraq, as he was,
but the unfortunate thing about it is that his writing wasn't.
His writing wasn't, but he was still.
You hear him in interviews, and he sounds so on point, although very like slow to speak, but he was always slow to speak.
I think he was always like that.
He always seems like when you hear him speak all the way back to 1970, he's a little bit more rapid then than he is later, but he seems like somebody who always was more comfortable writing.
And I think he was always very uncomfortable with interviews and with media.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it was
because he knew it from the other side.
He's a man who was at his best when he was alone with his fucking typewriter.
Yep.
Right.
But at that end,
he's a writer.
Jason.
Right. Like Thompson said in his book that is like strongly overlooked, and it's what we've been fucking talking about for about the last hour. The book or the movie, whichever. The last lines of the movie that say, Timothy Leary's revolution failed because when everybody came down, I'm paraphrasing, nobody saw the light. Nobody was tending the light at the end of the tunnel.
No.
And hopefully, all you listeners and ourselves included, we all fucking set a fire under our asses to tend that light. Because this is all we got.
In the entire corpus of Thompson, that was the one line that I had the most difficulty understanding.
And the one that meant the most.
You said, because as he said, like, there's nobody tending the light at the end of the tunnel, and all these people who thought LSD was going to be, like enlightenment as it hit, or whatever he said, but Leary had no idea of the grim meat hook realities that were awaiting these people at the other side of the trip.
No, you end up with a ton of acid heads at the end of the 60s, like lost, not knowing what they're doing in San Francisco. Like, what? It's acid. It's great. I don't know what to do. I'm hungry.
Which is certainly true, but the problem that I always had was, like, I think the light at the end of the tunnel is being tended.
Well,
sure. I mean, you would say
in the big sense, but I'm talking in the small, like nitty grit sense.
In the small nitty grit sense, what you're talking about is a bodhisattva, someone who holds over enlightenment to bring others into enlightenment.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people. That is why we're fucking here talking into microphones that will be shipped on the internet so you can fucking download. Is because we're trying to start a fire of, people that want to create the world that's worth fucking living in.
Right, that's exactly right.
And that's the point of it all. And I mean, I know that sounds fucking idealist, and you can fucking, and even myself will look at that in certain modes of fucking being. When I'm like, when I get off of work, I'm the most fucking jaded asshole. I pick up dog shit in Chicago. But
it's already cocked.
This kind of shit has to happen because nobody else is gonna do it.
Nobody
It's
else
just
is
not
gonna
gonna
do it
fall
anymore.
in your fucking laps, kids.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah, I mean that's most certainly, and that's why I don't look at Thompson's death as untimely, and that's also why it also sustains my stop talking,
Sorry, buddy. Sorry.
It's also it fulfills the that kind of paradigm structure that I've been living in recently, as far as any death that happens outside of me is not a death of an actual being, but it is an explosion of a thought that is meant to trigger something in my own being.
Absolutely.
And
that's what we all are.
And I think that's why I think like Thompson's death was perfectly planned, because I don't feel like any time before February 20th, 2005 that at least the four people sitting at this table and most people that I know were ready or prepared to take it to the next level. But I think we're actually fortified and have come to like some peace in some of the bullshit in our own heads to move forward.
It's the Viking Power Hour only on the BeLaw.org.